My daughter called me on a Tuesday morning, sounding sickeningly sweet as the loud mechanical hum of an airport terminal buzzed in the background. "Mom," she chirped, using that fake, innocent voice she only brought out when she was hiding a massive, unforgivable lie. "Gordon and I moved to Arizona last week. We just forgot to tell you." I stood completely frozen in the center of my kitchen, the heavy telephone pressed tightly to my ear. For 5 agonizing seconds, I said absolutely nothing, letting the pure, unadulterated venom of her betrayal wash over my entire body. A daughter does not accidentally forget to tell her widowed mother she is fleeing across the country with her husband. She runs because she is hiding a multi-million-dollar crime. And my cruel daughter was about to learn that her mother was not the helpless, senile old woman she thought she was. Thank you for watching this video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. My name is Beatrice. I am 65 years old. I am the grieving widow and the discarded mother. For 30 grueling years, I stood side by side with my late husband, waking up long before the sun to build a massive chain of artisanal bakeries and a highly lucrative commercial real estate portfolio from absolutely nothing. We scrubbed floors, we kneaded dough until our knuckles bled, and we built a golden empire so our only daughter would never know the bitter taste of poverty. Nadine was our golden child, treated like absolute royalty from the moment she took her first breath. But when my husband passed away 3 years ago, a suffocating silence fell over my sprawling Chicago home. The massive estate felt like a cold, empty tomb. I was profoundly lonely, desperately craving the chaotic, joyful laughter of grandchildren to fill the void he left behind. Nadine and her husband Gordon knew exactly how much I was hurting, and they expertly weaponized my fragile grief. 8 months ago, they sat on my expensive velvet sofa, crying perfectly orchestrated tears. They claimed they wanted to raise their future children right here in the city, close to me. They begged for exactly $2.5 million to completely renovate their crumbling historic property, promising me a beautiful nursery and a permanent place in their daily lives. I wrote that massive check without a single moment of hesitation. I thought I was securing my family legacy. I thought I was buying love. But blood does not guarantee loyalty, and unconditional love should never mean unconditional blindness. When Nadine casually announced her sudden relocation to Arizona, a terrifying, icy dread crawled up my spine. The sheer audacity of her statement completely paralyzed my lungs. I did not yell. I did not demand answers. I simply hung up the phone and walked straight into my private study. I approached the heavy mahogany bookshelf, triggered the hidden mechanism, and pulled open the heavy steel door of my concealed wall safe. My breath caught in my throat. The interior was completely, utterly bare. My physical property deeds were gone. The secondary corporate succession plans were gone. But most importantly, my medical power of attorney was missing. That highly sensitive document granted Nadine the absolute authority to make all medical and financial decisions on my behalf if I ever became mentally incapacitated. My mind began to race, desperately piecing together the terrifying puzzle of the last 6 months. Since the winter, Nadine had practically moved into my guest wing. She took over my meals. She took over my schedule. And she insisted I take a special daily regimen of holistic memory supplements. "Mama, you have to take these vitamins," she would coo, sliding a ceramic dish across the counter. "They're incredibly good for your brain." I swallowed them blindly, completely trusting the woman I had given life to. But the weeks that followed were a complete horrifying blur. My mind, usually a sharp fortress of numbers and logistics, crumbled into a dense, suffocating fog. I would forget why I entered a room. My hands would tremble violently. My speech slurred during dinner. I felt like a terrified prisoner trapped inside a failing physical vessel. And Nadine was always there, her phone conveniently angled toward me, recording every single humiliating moment of my sudden cognitive decline. I rushed out of my study and tore into the heavy black garbage bags they had carelessly left behind in the garage before fleeing. I dug through the rotting food and discarded mail with my bare hands until I found it. Buried at the very bottom was a crushed, unmarked cardboard box holding a silver blister pack. I ran back to my computer, my heart hammering violently against my ribs, and typed the alphanumeric code stamped on the foil into a restricted medical database. The glowing screen shattered my entire reality. It was not a holistic vitamin. It was a highly regulated, severely potent neurosuppressant. It was a dangerous chemical compound used exclusively to subdue violent, completely unmanageable patients in psychiatric wards. The severe side effects included extreme short-term memory loss, chronic lethargy, and profound cognitive detachment, perfectly mimicking the aggressive onset of early dementia. My own flesh and blood had not been caring for me. She had been chemically lobotomizing me right at my own dining table. She was methodically building a digital catalog of my artificial decline to formally declare me incompetent. They wanted me locked safely away in a sterile white room so they could feast on my life work without interference. The white-hot anger inside me instantly compressed into a solid, immovable glacier. The dense fog in my brain burned away entirely, replaced by a ruthless, absolute clarity. I immediately called Clarence, my seasoned corporate lawyer and oldest confidant. He arrived at 2 a.m. I did not shed a single tear. I laid the crushed blister pack and the empty safe logs onto my desk. I told him to completely bypass my liquid assets and trace the $2.5 million check. For 30 tense minutes, the only sound in the room was the frantic clicking of his keyboard. When Clarence finally turned the monitor toward me, the blood completely drained from his face. Nadine had not renovated her house in Chicago. She had used my money to purchase a sprawling, multi-million-dollar luxury mansion in Arizona entirely under a newly formed corporate shell. But the sheer depravity of their scheme went significantly deeper. Clarence discovered that Gordon had utilized my stolen medical power of attorney to completely leverage my entire commercial real estate portfolio. They had fraudulently extracted a massive $10 million cash loan against my bakeries and warehouses. "We must contact the authorities right this second, Beatrice," Clarence urged, his voice trembling with genuine professional panic. "We can stop this completely." I stared at the glowing screen, my expression perfectly frozen. "No," I whispered, my voice echoing with a cold, predatory calm. "Calling the police for a simple fraud charge is an absolute insult to the immense magnitude of her betrayal. I do not want her simply arrested. I want to completely shatter her empire. I want her to build her entire future on a mountain of my stolen money, and then I want to pull the earth right out from under her feet." The following afternoon, my phone rang. It was a video call from Nadine. I immediately slouched my shoulders, softening my jaw to perfectly mimic the profound disorientation I had genuinely felt just a few weeks prior. I answered the call, letting my eyes glaze over with a manufactured, hazy confusion. "Hey, Mom," Nadine purred, her voice dripping with artificial, condescending pity. "We are just getting settled. How is your memory today? Did you manage to find your keys?" I widened my eyes, portraying a deep, helpless panic. "I cannot find my checkbook, Nadine," I stammered, letting my voice crack perfectly. "My mind is just entirely blank today. I am so confused." Nadine subtly turned her head toward Gordon. A sharp, triumphant smirk flashed across her lips. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. She actually believed her chemical lobotomy was permanent. "Do not worry about a single thing, Mom," she said, speaking to me as if I were a clueless toddler. "We are handling all the complicated paperwork. Gordon is actually out at a networking seminar right now trying to find some basic consulting work to keep the lights on. Just rest your poor brain." As she ended the call, my secondary phone vibrated. It was Vernon, the elite private investigator I had urgently dispatched to Arizona. He sent a single high-resolution photograph. Gordon was not at a boring networking seminar. He was sitting in an astronomically expensive private dining room, smiling broadly across the table from the chief executive officer of my absolute biggest corporate rival. Gordon was actively using my stolen $10 million to execute a massive leveraged buyout of my competitor, intending to cannibalize my established supply chains and bleed my life work entirely dry. My weak, cowardly son-in-law genuinely believed he was an apex predator. He had absolutely no idea he was swimming straight into a fatal trap. I instructed Clarence to ready the legal strike. I packed a single overnight bag, bypassed the commercial airports completely, and boarded my private executive jet. I was flying directly into the vulnerable heart of their criminal operation. My daughter believed I was sitting helplessly in Chicago, completely sedated and waiting for the state to lock me away. She had absolutely no idea I was rocketing toward her new sanctuary at 500 miles per hour. When I touched down in Arizona, I did not go to their lavish mansion. I went directly to the sprawling private medical clinic of Dr. Leland, the physician who had formally signed my fraudulent dementia diagnosis for the state courts. Vernon had successfully breached the clinic network and uncovered a heavily buried offshore transaction ledger. Nadine had wired exactly $150,000 of my stolen money directly to the doctor to pay off his catastrophic illegal gambling debts. I walked into his private office under the cover of darkness. When Leland looked up and recognized my face, the absolute shock completely drained the remaining color from his skin. I did not shout. I simply tossed the thick folder containing his illegal wire transfers and the forged medical assessments directly onto his desk. "You are a man of science, Doctor," I said, my voice completely devoid of any warmth. "You accepted stolen money to maliciously weaponize the judicial system against a healthy citizen. You are currently choosing between a quiet resignation and dying in a federal penitentiary. Pick up the pen." Leland let out a shuddering sob, his hands shaking so violently he could barely form the letters. He wrote a detailed, comprehensive confession, explicitly detailing Nadine and Gordon's massive bribery and completely invalidating the emergency guardianship petition. With the legal shield of their medical fraud entirely destroyed, I was finally ready to execute the killing blow. The following evening descended with a stifling, heavy humidity. I sat completely concealed inside a blacked-out surveillance van parked directly across the street from my daughter's stolen mansion. Through the tinted windows, I watched a steady, luxurious procession of high-end vehicles flow through the massive wrought iron gates. Nadine was throwing a lavish catered gala, sparing absolutely no expense to project the ultimate image of untouchable corporate royalty. Vernon adjusted the highly sensitive laser microphone aimed directly at the massive glass panes of the formal dining room. The isolated audio feed crackled to life inside our soundproof van. I heard Nadine laughing, a bright, sparkling sound that completely turned my stomach. She was holding court near the grand entryway. "We just needed a massive change of pace," Nadine purred smoothly to a wealthy-looking guest. "And my mother has unfortunately taken a very sudden, very severe turn for the worse health-wise. Her mind is completely gone. We had to step in and assume total control of her entire estate. It is incredibly tragic, but Gordon has been so remarkably strong taking over the heavy burden of the corporate empire." I sat in the absolute darkness, my jaw clenched so tightly my teeth began to grind. She was actively building the public narrative of the tragic, failing mother and the heroic daughter who was bravely stepping up to save the family legacy. But the true focus of the evening was taking place in the secluded dining room. Gordon sat proudly across from the rival chief executive officer. Heavy leather folders were snapped shut. The legal contracts for the $10 million acquisition were now fully executed. Gordon confidently pulled his laptop closer. "Consider the final transfer completely done," Gordon announced proudly, his voice carrying the ultimate catastrophic lie. "I am authorizing the release protocol right now." Little did they know, I had anticipated that entrusting massive operational power required an equally massive, totally invisible safety net. My core equity was secured behind a sovereign financial fortress. I had personally designed a lethal, highly automated digital snare known as the poison pill clause. Any massive capital withdrawal required my live, heavily encrypted retinal verification and dynamic vocal passphrase. Gordon arrogantly thought his forged medical documents effortlessly overrode absolutely everything. I opened my encrypted tactical laptop and transmitted a single override code to the sovereign servers. The poison pill protocol woke up with terrifying efficiency. Inside the dining room, Gordon eagerly hit the transfer key. But the system did not just simply decline the transaction. It actively seized the funds permanently, freezing the entire account balance under a sovereign legal lock. The defensive architecture then aggressively launched its secondary lethal countermeasures. A massive, heavily encrypted data packet containing the forged documents, the unauthorized routing requests, and the specific Internet Protocol addresses originating from the stolen mansion was automatically compiled and immediately dispatched directly to the Cyber Crimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My son-in-law had just permanently flagged himself on the federal radar as an active perpetrator of massive coordinated money laundering and interstate wire fraud. I watched the visual feed as the fatal error code materialized on Gordon's screen. A subtle, highly confused wrinkle appeared between his eyebrows. He frantically tapped the keyboard, blindly grasping for any financial lifeline. The rival executive leaned forward, his smug smile fading into cold suspicion. "I do not sign binding corporate acquisition contracts on the promise of a routing delay, Gordon," he stated coldly. While Gordon desperately tried to placate his furious rival, the absolute true apocalypse arrived at the front gates. It started as a distant high-pitched wail echoing over the dark hills, rapidly multiplying until it became a deafening, terrifying chorus. The low rhythmic thumping of the jazz band was instantly drowned out by the aggressive, synchronized screaming of heavy law enforcement sirens. A heavy reinforced tactical vehicle hit the center locking mechanism of the wrought iron gates at 40 miles per hour. The deafening crash of yielding metal echoed loudly through the humid night air. For massive blacked-out sport utility vehicles and a fleet of marked state trooper cruisers aggressively swarmed into the circular driveway. Dozens of highly trained, heavily armed federal agents wearing tactical vests poured out of the dark vehicles. The affluent party guests instantly froze in sheer terror. Nadine dropped her crystal wine glass. It shattered completely on the marble floor of the grand foyer. The heavy wooden doors of the formal dining room swung wide open. Gordon stepped out into the main hallway, completely oblivious to the catastrophic reality. He confidently adjusted the lapels of his expensive suit and walked directly toward the lead federal agent. "Officer, there must be some kind of massive misunderstanding here," Gordon announced loudly, projecting a smooth, rehearsed charm. "I am the sole legal conservator for my mother-in-law's entire estate. You have absolutely no jurisdiction to interrupt this private transaction." The federal agent stared directly into Gordon's eyes with an expression of cold professional disgust. "Gordon, you are currently under formal federal indictment for the commission of massive interstate wire fraud, international money laundering, severe estate fraud, and the deliberate malicious forgery of binding legal medical documents." The sharp metallic clinking sound of the heavy steel handcuffs completely destroyed the final lingering remnants of Gordon's corporate illusion. The rival executive instantly recognized the catastrophic legal peril, physically stepping backward to sever his proximity to the massive federal crime scene. Gordon finally panicked. The smooth facade completely shattered. He frantically looked around the crowded room, his voice cracking with miserable desperation. "This is an absolute mistake. My mother-in-law is severely demented. She is completely incapacitated. I am the only one saving her legacy." I stepped out of the dark surveillance van. The heavy, humid evening air surrounded me, but I felt absolutely nothing except the pure, unadulterated ice flowing through my veins. I was not wearing the loose, comfortable clothing of a frail, failing old woman. I was wearing a meticulously tailored charcoal gray suit. My posture was perfectly straight. I began my steady march up the long, sweeping circular driveway. The armed federal agents instinctively parted to allow me passage. The affluent party guests, who had just spent 2 hours listening to Nadine spin a tragic tale about my severe cognitive decline, turned to stare at me. A collective audible gasp rippled through the beautifully dressed crowd. I ascended the marble steps and crossed the threshold into the blindingly bright foyer. Nadine was standing frozen near a towering stone pillar. Her perfect exterior had completely disintegrated. She was staring at me with wide, completely terrified eyes. She had just realized that her declined premium credit card was not a simple banking error. It was the opening salvo of a completely orchestrated financial apocalypse. I walked deliberately across the polished marble floor. Gordon was completely frozen in the tight grip of two towering federal agents. I ignored him entirely. I turned my undivided attention exclusively to the lead federal investigator. "My name is Beatrice," I stated clearly, ensuring my voice carried across the silent room. "I am the direct victim of the massive, highly coordinated interstate wire fraud currently occurring inside this building." Clarence stepped smoothly to my side and handed the heavy manila folder to the investigator. "Inside you will find the complete financial routing numbers tracking exactly $10 million stolen from my commercial portfolio," I continued, my voice cutting through the tension like a finely sharpened blade. "You will also find a fully notarized sworn written confession from Dr. Leland explicitly detailing how he was aggressively bribed to entirely fabricate my medical records. The power of attorney currently resting in your evidence bag is a complete and total forgery. I am of perfectly sound mind, and I have just personally initiated the federal poison pill protocol that permanently locked down their fraudulent accounts." The absolute finality of my words hung heavily in the dead silence of the grand foyer. The entire house of cards had completely and utterly collapsed. Nadine finally shattered. She violently dropped to her knees right there on the cold marble floor. "Mom, please," she screamed, her voice a pathetic broken wail that echoed tragically through the massive house. "Please, you have to stop them. We can fix this. I am so sorry." I looked down at the weeping, pathetic creature groveling at my feet. I felt absolutely no pity. She had willingly chosen the battlefield, and she had foolishly brought a knife to a nuclear war. "You forgot to tell me you moved, Nadine," I whispered softly, ensuring she heard every single devastating syllable. "And I forgot to tell you I designed the security system you tried to wipe." 6 months later, I am sitting in the quiet, deeply secure sanctuary of my sunlit executive office, listening to the comforting hum of my thriving bakery empire. The sprawling stolen mansion in Arizona was immediately seized and completely liquidated by federal marshals. Nadine and Gordon were officially indicted by a grand jury and are currently serving 20-year sentences in a maximum security federal penitentiary. They were stripped of absolutely everything they had stolen, left with nothing but the bleak, terrifying reality of their incredibly long incarceration. I legally dissolved every single personal and financial tie to my daughter. I actively erased her from my legacy with the exact same cold, calculated efficiency she had used when she attempted to lock me away in a medicated oblivion. However, I established a completely new, hyper-secure financial trust fund exclusively dedicated to her unborn child, managed solely by Clarence. The child will eventually be provided with a pristine pathway to a highly successful life, completely insulated from the toxic, greedy influence of the people who brought him into the world. I have secured the absolute future of my empire, and I possess a profound, unshakable peace that no amount of their stolen money could ever buy. The hardest truth a parent can face is that blood does not guarantee loyalty. We spend our entire lives building a legacy to protect our children. But sometimes we must build solid walls to protect ourselves from them. Greed can turn the people you raised into strangers who see you only as an obstacle to your wealth. Never ignore your gut feeling. Never sign away your independence. True family respects your dignity. Those who plot in the shadows only respect your bank account. Have you ever experienced a shocking betrayal from someone you trusted completely? Tell me your story in the comments below and let me know what city you are watching from today. Keep your eyes open, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.